The prisoner's plea. Show mercy, human. My body will give you powerful offspring, begged the captive alien. The rust-flecked door groaned open, casting a long shadow across the sand-strewn floor of the prison cell. Darrell Bourne stood silhouetted in the doorway, the desert sun at his back illuminating his broad shoulders and a gleaming combat blade gripped in his right hand. Sweat trickled down his temple, leaving a clean trail through the dust on his tan skin. Inside the dimly lit cell, a figure huddled in the corner. As his eyes adjusted to the gloom, Darrell made out the slender form of a female alien. Her emerald skin was a stark contrast to the drab surroundings. Long white hair cascaded over her shoulders, partially obscuring a face marked with fear and exhaustion. The rough-spun fabric of her prison garments hung in tatters, barely preserving her modesty. Please, her voice trembled as she pressed herself against the wall. Those striking violet eyes were wide with terror. Show mercy, human male. My body will give you powerful offspring. Darrell froze, the combat blade suddenly heavy in his hand. The alien woman, Valari, if he remembered the prisoner manifest correctly, was an Eridian. Their forces had been decimated when the human fleet arrived to support the Calorian alliance against the Neridian sovereignty. Now she knelt before him, believing he'd come to execute her. Damn it all, he muttered, striding forward. The Neridian flinched as he raised the blade. But instead of striking her, he brought it down on the bindings at her wrists. The reinforced cord split with a satisfying snap. You're free, Darrell said, reaching into his pocket and producing a small metallic key. He pressed it into her palm, closing her slender fingers around it. I'll tell the commanders you somehow escaped. Now go. Confusion replaced fear in those violet eyes. Why would you help me? I am your enemy. Darrell holstered his blade with practiced efficiency. I didn't sign up to execute prisoners, especially not ones who haven't been given a fair trial. He glanced over his shoulder. The guard rotation changes in 10 minutes. Head east through the maintenance tunnels. You'll find an exit near the old water reclamation plant. The Neridian woman rose unsteadily to her feet, clutching the key to her chest. I thank you, human. Darrell, he corrected, already backing toward the door. My name is Darrell Bourne. Now move, before I change my mind. She nodded, a flash of determination crossing her features. Without another word, she slipped past him, her movements graceful despite her weakened state. Darrell watched her disappear down the corridor, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his military career. Captain Harlow would have his head if he discovered what Darrell had done. But some lines weren't meant to be crossed, even in war. An unexpected return. 3 days later, Darrell found himself patrolling the outskirts of New Meridian, the human settlement that had sprung up around the main military base. The twin pair of moons hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the desert landscape. His orders were simple: monitor the perimeter for any Neridian insurgent activity. Sector 4 clear, he reported into his comm unit, receiving only static in response. The dust storms had been playing havoc with their communications equipment for days now. A sound, the faintest whisper of movement, caught his attention. Darrell spun, rifle raised, only to find himself staring into familiar violet eyes. You, he breathed, lowering his weapon slightly. What the hell are you doing here? You should be halfway across the continent by now. Valari stepped from the shadows, her emerald skin gleaming in the moonlight. She'd replaced her prison rags with more practical attire, likely stolen from a supply depot. I couldn't leave, she said simply. Not without repaying my debt. There's no debt, Darrell insisted, glancing nervously over his shoulder. And if anyone sees you? Your patrol is alone for another 20 minutes, she interrupted. I've been watching. And I have information. Something your commanders need to hear. Darrell frowned. What kind of information? The kind that could save thousands of lives, both human and Neridian. Her expression hardened. There's a faction within our military planning something terrible. Something I cannot allow to happen, even if it means betraying my own people. Before Daryl could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. In the distance, a plume of fire rose above the settlement. Too late, Valerie whispered, her face ashen. They've already begun. The explosion rocked the settlement, sending a plume of orange flame into the darkening sky. Daryl grabbed Valarie's arm instinctively, pulling her away from the blast. We need to move, he growled, scanning the horizon where more flashes illuminated the distant ridge line. That's artillery fire. Your people, not mine, Valerie corrected, her violet eyes reflecting the distant flames. The extremist faction I warned you about. They call themselves the Purifiers. Another explosion, closer this time, sent them both diving for cover behind a rocky outcropping. The ground trembled beneath them, and Daryl felt the sting of sand against his face. We can't stay here, he said, checking his rifle's charge. And I can't take you back to base. Not with everything going to hell. The caves in the eastern canyon, Valerie suggested, her voice steady despite the chaos. My people used them as shelter before the war. They're deep enough to protect us from bombardment. Daryl hesitated only briefly before nodding. Lead the way. Sacred ground. They moved swiftly through the desert landscape, keeping low as aircraft screamed overhead. The twin moons provided just enough light to navigate by, though Daryl occasionally activated his night vision to check for patrols. The last thing they needed was to run into either human or Neridian forces. You're risking everything for me, Valerie said as they paused behind a cluster of rock formations. Why? Daryl wiped sweat from his brow, considering her question. Because it's the right thing to do. And because I'm starting to think this war isn't as black and white as they told us. Her emerald features softened in the moonlight. Few wars are, Daryl born. The way she said his name sent an unexpected warmth through him. Here in the desert night, away from the rigid structures of military hierarchy, he found himself noticing things he shouldn't, the graceful curve of her neck, the determination in her eyes, the surprising strength in her slender frame. They continued eastward, the sounds of battle gradually receding behind them. The terrain grew more rugged, with towering rock formations casting long shadows across their path. After an hour of hard travel, Valerie led them into a narrow ravine that wound between two cliff faces. Not much farther, she assured him, her breathing slightly labored. The entrance is hidden, but I know where to look. Daryl nodded, trying not to stare at the way her makeshift clothing clung to her form as she climbed ahead of him. He'd never been this close to an Eridian before, at least not one who wasn't trying to kill him. There was something undeniably captivating about her alien beauty. Here, Valerie announced, stopping before what appeared to be a solid rock wall. She pressed her palm against a specific spot, and to Daryl's surprise, a section of stone slid aside, revealing a dark passage. Neridian biorecognition technology, she explained. It responds to our skin's electrical patterns. Impressive, Daryl murmured, following her into the cool darkness. The passage widened into a spacious cavern with surprisingly smooth walls. As his eyes adjusted, he noticed faint bioluminescent patterns glowing along the ceiling, not bright enough to be seen from outside, but sufficient to navigate by. These caves were sacred to my ancestors, Valerie explained, moving deeper into the network of chambers. They believed the patterns in the stone were messages from the cosmos. They settled in a smaller chamber that showed signs of previous habitation, stone benches carved from the walls, niches that might have once held supplies. Daryl set down his pack and began taking inventory of their resources, 2 water canteens, emergency rations, a medkit, his sidearm with spare energy cells, and the combat blade. It won't be comfortable, he said, but we should be safe here until I can figure out our next move. Valerie sat across from him, her knees drawn up to her chest. There may not be a next move, Daryl. The Purifiers won't stop until they've driven all humans from this world. Or worse. Then we'll have to stop them, he replied simply. She studied him with those penetrating violet eyes. "You're unlike any human I've encountered. Most would have executed me without hesitation." "Most humans aren't me," Daryl said with a half-smile. He reached into his pack and pulled out a ration bar, breaking it in half and offering a portion to her. "Here. Not exactly a gourmet meal, but it'll keep you going." Their fingers brushed as she accepted the food, and Daryl felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. Valerie must have felt it too, because her eyes widened slightly and a deeper shade of green suffused her cheeks. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." As they ate in companionable silence, Daryl found himself increasingly aware of her presence, the subtle floral scent that seemed to emanate from her skin, the graceful way she moved, the intelligence behind those alien eyes. It was disconcerting to feel such attraction to someone he'd been trained to view as the enemy. "We should rest," he finally said, clearing his throat. "Take shifts watching the entrance." "I'll go first." Valerie nodded, stretching out on the smooth stone floor. "Wake me in a few hours." Daryl watched as she curled onto her side, white hair spilling around her like a halo. Even in these desperate circumstances, there was something undeniably alluring about her. Something that made him question everything he thought he knew about the war, about the Neridians, about himself. The world scar. Daryl jolted awake to the insistent beeping of his comm unit. He dozed off during his watch, lulled by the cave's peaceful silence, a dangerous mistake in wartime. Valerie still slept soundly across the chamber, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm slightly faster than a human's. The comm unit beeped again, not a general broadcast, but a direct signal on his squad's emergency frequency. "Anyone from Echo Squad, position overrun, need immediate extraction." Static consumed the rest of the message, but Daryl recognized Lieutenant Rivera's voice. His unit was in trouble. "Valerie," he called softly, moving to her side. "Wake up." Her eyes snapped open, instantly alert, a soldier's reflex. "What is it?" "My squad's in trouble." He showed her the comm unit. "They're requesting extraction." Valerie sat up, her white hair tumbling around her shoulders. "You wish to help them?" It wasn't a question, but Daryl nodded anyway. "They're my people. My responsibility. Even though I have information about the Purifier's weapon." She tilted her head, studying him with those penetrating violet eyes. "Information that could save countless lives, both human and Neridian." Daryl ran a hand through his hair, conflict evident on his face. "Tell me about this weapon." Valerie rose to her feet, moving with that fluid grace that seemed inherent to her species. "The Purifiers have adapted ancient Neridian terraforming technology. They call it the World Scar. It can alter planetary atmospheres, specifically to create conditions lethal to humans while leaving Neridians unaffected." "Gods," Daryl breathed. "That's genocide." "Yes." Her emerald features hardened. "Which is why I fled after overhearing their plans. My people want independence, Daryl, not extermination. The Purifiers are extremists who don't represent the majority of Neridians." The comm unit beeped again, more urgently this time. "We have two objectives now," Daryl decided. "Save my squad and get your information to command. Both are time-sensitive." Valerie stepped closer, her scent, like desert flowers after rainfall, filling his senses. "Your loyalty to your comrades is admirable. It's a trait my people respect deeply. What would a Neridian do in my position?" Daryl asked, genuinely curious. A smile touched her lips. "The same. Family bonds, whether by blood or battle, are sacred to us." She hesitated, then added, "Though perhaps we would approach it differently." "How so?" "We would seek to unite the objectives rather than divide them." Her violet eyes gleamed with sudden inspiration. "Your squad, where are they pinned down?" Daryl consulted his tactical display. "The old mining complex, about 15 kilometers north." "Why?" Because that's where the purifiers are testing their weapon. Valari's expression grew grim. Your squad isn't just under attack, they're unwitting test subjects. The revelation hit Daryl like a physical blow. His friends, his brothers in arms, were being used as guinea pigs for a weapon of mass destruction. Then we stopped them, he said, his voice hardening with resolve. All of them. Valari nodded, moving to gather their supplies. There's a problem, though. The weapon is powered by a fusion core deep within the mining complex. Getting to it will require someone who understands Neridian technology. You. Yes. And someone capable of fighting through whatever defenses they've established. Me. She turned to face him fully, and for a moment, the air between them seemed charged with more than just tactical planning. This mission, we might not survive it. Daryl met her gaze steadily. Then we'd better make it count. As they prepared to leave the sanctuary of the caves, Valari caught his arm. Daryl, there's something else you should know. About what I said when you found me in that cell. He paused, remembering her desperate plea about bearing his offspring. You were scared. You said what you thought would keep you alive. No. Her grip tightened slightly. Among my people, offering to bear someone's children is the highest honor we can bestow. It means we believe their genetic legacy worthy of continuation. She looked away, emerald cheeks darkening. I spoke from instinct, not fear. The admission hung between them as they gathered their gear and headed deeper into the desert night, toward a confrontation that would determine not just their fates, but the future of two species. Legacy of two worlds. The mining complex loomed against the pre-dawn sky like a mechanical cancer. Smoke rose from several structures, and the intermittent flash of weapons fire illuminated the compound's perimeter. Daryl and Valari crouched behind a ridge overlooking the facility, studying the scene through his tactical scope. There, Valari pointed to a central tower bristling with alien technology. The World Scar device. The atmospheric processors are already active, see the green mist. Daryl adjusted the scope's filters and cursed. A sickly emerald fog was indeed spreading from vents around the complex. How long before it becomes lethal? Minutes, not hours. Your squad. She consulted a device on her wrist. They're in the eastern bunker. The contamination will reach them soon. Then we move now. Daryl shouldered his rifle and checked his remaining equipment. You get to the device. I'll extract my people. Daryl. Valari's hand found his arm. The device can only be shut down from the inside. Once I enter that tower, I won't be coming out. The weight of her words settled over him. After everything they'd been through, after the strange bond that had formed between them, she was asking him to let her sacrifice herself. There has to be another way. She smiled sadly. Sometimes there isn't. But this is my choice to make. My people's extremists started this, let one of us end it. They moved down the ridge together, separating at the compound's edge. Daryl watched Valari disappear into the maze of industrial structures, her slight form swallowed by shadows and smoke. Then he turned toward the bunker where his squad was trapped. The rescue was brutal but swift. Daryl found Rivera and 3 other survivors barricaded in a storage room, their faces already showing the early effects of atmospheric poisoning, labored breathing, discolored skin around their eyes. Born. Rivera gasped. Where the hell have you been? Getting us a way out, Daryl replied, distributing emergency respirators from his pack. Can you move? We're mobile, Rivera confirmed, though his voice was strained. What's the plan? Extract now, explain later. As they fought their way toward the perimeter, explosions rocked the complex. Through the chaos, Daryl caught glimpses of the central tower, systems overloading, the green mist beginning to thin. Valari was keeping her word. They reached the extraction point just as a human dropship swooped low, its pilot guided by Daryl's emergency beacon. As his squad clambered aboard, Darrow looked back at the complex one final time. The tower was collapsing in on itself, the World Scar device consuming its own power source in a controlled meltdown. The atmospheric contamination was dissipating, but there was no sign of Valari. "Sir." Rivera called from the dropship. "We need to go." Darrow hesitated for one heartbeat, then sprinted toward the ship. As they lifted off, he saw a figure emerge from the wreckage of the tower, slight, moving with familiar grace despite obvious injuries. "Put us down," he shouted to the pilot. "There's a survivor." "Sir, that's a Neridian. That's an ally. Put us down." The dropship touched down long enough for Darrow to leap out and reach Valari. She collapsed into his arms, her emerald skin pale but her violet eyes bright with triumph. "The device is destroyed," she whispered. "The contamination will clear within hours." "You did it," he said, lifting her easily. "You saved everyone." As the dropship carried them toward safety, Valari rested her head against his shoulder. "What happens now, Darrow Bourne? When your commanders learn what transpired?" Darrow considered this. He'd be court-martialed for harboring an enemy combatant. But he'd also prevented a genocide and saved his squad. Military justice was rarely straightforward. "I'll tell them the truth," he decided. That a Neridian soldier chose to save human lives at the cost of her own. That maybe it's time to look for peace instead of victory. And if they don't listen? Darrow met her gaze, seeing something there that went beyond gratitude or tactical alliance. In the span of days, they'd moved from enemies to partners to something deeper, something that transcended the artificial boundaries of war. "Then we'll make our own way," he said quietly. "Together." 2 years later, the Terran-Neridian Accords were signed in a ceremony that made headlines across the galaxy. The peace treaty included provisions for joint colonies, cultural exchange programs, and most controversially, legal recognition of interspecies partnerships. The first such partnership had been registered months earlier, between a human salvage officer named Darrow Bourne and a Neridian xenobiologist named Valari. Their bonding ceremony had been a private affair, attended only by members of Echo Squad and a handful of Neridian diplomats who had defected from the Purifier movement. Their first child, a daughter with her mother's violet eyes and her father's stubborn determination, was born on the anniversary of the World Scar incident. They named her Unity, and she would grow up in a universe where the love between her parents had literally helped forge peace between worlds. In the end, Valari's initial plea in that prison cell had proven prophetic in ways neither of them could have imagined. She had indeed given him powerful offspring, not through conquest or desperation, but through the choice to stand together against the darkness. Some bonds, forged in fire and tempered by sacrifice, truly could change the galaxy. The end.